Maybe what exhausts you the most is not what's happening around you, but what keeps happening inside your mind. You believe in God, you pray, you read the Word, and still the same thoughts return. Old fears, recurring guilt, inner dialogues that refuse to leave. This video is not about a lack of faith. It's about understanding why genuine faith does not always produce immediate changes in the mind. Here we will talk about the difference between believing in God and learning to think with a renewed mind, about how faith can be real, deep, and sincere, even while the mind is still struggling. You will understand why God does not begin by changing your thoughts, but by changing the place from which you fight them, and how that can bring relief, clarity, and less spiritual self-pressure into your daily life. Have you ever wondered why you believe yet continue to think the same way? Why certain thoughts seem stronger than your prayers? Why you feel guilty for still fighting battles in your mind? If your faith is real but your mind feels tired, confused, or at war, this video is for you. Believing in God was never meant to be the same as having a silent mind. And yet many Christians carry this quiet expectation, the idea that if faith is real, difficult thoughts should disappear. As if God's presence could be measured by the absence of inner conflict. But the reality of faith is often very different from that. You believe, and still, your mind keeps speaking loudly. There is a specific kind of frustration that grows from this place. You pray, you read the Word, you seek God sincerely, and yet certain thoughts refuse to leave. Old fears return. Guilt shows up without warning. Inner dialogues repeat themselves. And over time, the struggle stops being only with your thoughts and becomes a struggle with yourself. A quiet question begins to form. What is wrong with me? The Apostle Paul describes this experience without trying to soften it. He writes, "But I see another law in my members, waging war against the law of my mind and bringing me into captivity to the law of sin which is in my members." Romans 7:23. Paul is not speaking as someone distant from God. He is speaking from inside faith, inside relationship, inside the spiritual journey. This war is not an accident along the path of faith. It belongs to the human territory where faith takes place. The mind does not reorganize at the same pace the spirit awakens. Some areas take time. Some inner structures do not fall all at once. And this does not mean God is absent. It means there is a process. The problem begins when you interpret this struggle as spiritual failure. When the presence of difficult thoughts becomes evidence against your faith. When inner conflict is seen as weakness, immaturity, or distance from God. That kind of interpretation does not bring transformation. It only adds weight. Much of the mental exhaustion Christians experience does not come from what they think, but from the constant effort to stop thinking, from trying to silence the mind in order to feel worthy of God's presence. Thoughts appear, and immediately self-pressure follows. Faith begins to be measured by mental control instead of dependence. The Bible never romanticizes the inner life of a believer. It does not present people with perfectly regulated emotions or fully aligned thoughts. It presents real men and women walking through inner conflict while still being sustained by God. Paul does not write Romans 7 from a place of defeat, but from a place of spiritual honesty. Jesus never required mental silence as a condition for closeness. He never demanded psychological stability before offering his presence. He drew near to people who were confused, divided, and inwardly exhausted. Inner conflict does not drive Jesus away. What deepens exhaustion is fighting while believing you should already be somewhere else. Perhaps the first sign of spiritual maturity is not the absence of struggle, but a change in how you interpret it. When you stop using the conflict as an accusation against yourself, something begins to ease. The war continues, but it no longer defines who you are or how close God is, and it is from this point that something begins to shift slowly. not the thoughts yet, but the ground beneath your feet as you live with them. When faith begins to work, it rarely touches what you feel first. Most of the time, it changes where you stand spiritually before it changes any inner perception. That is why it is common to experience a quiet sense of misalignment after believing. Something has changed, yet the mind still feels the same. The heart has been repositioned, but the thoughts have not followed at the same pace. This inner displacement is often uncomfortable. You know you belong to God, yet you still react the way you used to. Spiritual identity has been established, but emotional perception continues to operate in old territories. It is like walking on new ground while using old maps that no longer fully match where you are. Paul points directly to this reality when he writes, "If then you were raised with Christ, seek those things which are above, where Christ is, seated at the right hand of God. Set your mind on things above, not on things on the earth." Colossians 3, verse 1-2. He is not describing a perfect mental state. He is describing a new spiritual position that still needs to be learned internally. Faith does not begin by changing sensations. It begins by changing belonging. Before reorganizing thoughts, God changes the ground beneath your feet. He redefines your position before redefining your perception. There is a space between these two things, and it is exactly there that many people feel confused, tired, and even frustrated. The mind, however, does not reorganize instantly. It carries emotional memories, old structures, reflexes built over years. Thinking in a renewed way is not automatic. It is a process of relearning. And God does not confuse slowness with resistance. He knows that formation takes time. The problem appears when you interpret this distance between position and feeling as spiritual failure, when you believe you should already feel what is already true. This inner pressure creates tension, not maturity. Faith begins to be lived as pressure to feel right, instead of rest in who God is. Jesus does not rush feelings. He does not demand emotional clarity before offering his presence. He walks with you in this in-between space where faith is already real, but the mind is still reorganizing. He does not force the process. He remains. Perhaps the discomfort you feel is not a sign of spiritual stagnation, but evidence that you no longer fully belong to the old place. The mind may still think the same way, but the heart has already been repositioned. And when you begin to see this, something changes quietly. Not the thoughts yet, but the way you see yourself while you are still thinking this way. There is a quiet expectation among many Christians that God will interrupt certain thoughts immediately, as if spiritual transformation were a sudden intervention, a sharp cut, an internal shutdown. But in practice, God rarely works that way. He does not invade the mind to erase it. He stays long enough to rebuild it. Difficult thoughts are almost never recent failures. They are usually old constructions, formed over years of experiences, losses, fears, words spoken, or environments lived in. That is why, when they return, they do not signal spiritual regression. They reveal deeper layers that are still being touched with care. God does not treat the mind as a problem to be eliminated, but as a place to be formed. Scripture recognizes this deep connection between the inner life and identity when it says, "For as he thinks in his soul, so is he." Proverbs 23:7. This verse carries no accusation. It describes the formative power of thoughts. What has been imagined, repeated, and sustained over a long time does not disappear all at once. God works through formation, not abrupt interruption. He does not break inner structures by force. He weakens them through presence, through repeated truth, through new experiences of safety. Many times God's silence is not the absence of action. It is the space where reconstruction happens quietly, without noise, without pressure. Silence, in fact, is often where the mind resists the most, because it exposes thoughts that were once drowned out by the noise of life. And instead of recognizing this as progress, many interpret it as getting worse. But noticing your thoughts more clearly does not mean they have grown stronger. It means something in you has become more aware. Jesus is not disturbed by what emerges in the silence. He does not withdraw when difficult thoughts surface. He remains. And that very presence begins to teach the mind something new. It does not need to defend itself all the time. It can exist without being in control. The transformation God brings to the mind rarely comes with internal announcements. There is no clear feeling of, now it has changed. There are small shifts, almost imperceptible. A thought that once dominated begins to lose its grip. A guilt that once suffocated lasts for a shorter time. Nothing dramatic, yet deeply real. And perhaps this is exactly where the process takes on a new meaning. If God is not in a hurry to silence your mind, then maybe the goal was never to erase it, but to teach it how to exist without carrying all the weight alone. Many thoughts do not become heavy simply because they exist. They become heavy when judgment comes with them. It's not only the content of the thought that exhausts you, but the way you react to it. A thought appears, and immediately a quiet question follows. Why is this still here? That is the moment the battle intensifies. There is a very specific guilt that many Christians carry without realizing it. The guilt of still fighting mentally after believing. As if true faith should produce a calm, organized, and spiritually stable mind at all times. When that does not happen, the person is not only dealing with a difficult thought, but with the feeling of failing God. Paul speaks directly to this weight when he writes, "There is therefore now no condemnation for those who are in Christ Jesus." Romans 8:1. This statement does not come as a reward for those who won the inner battle. It appears right in the middle of the conflict as a declaration that grace remains while the struggle still exists. Spiritual guilt works like an invisible amplifier. It makes ordinary thoughts feel dangerous. It turns normal formation processes into signs of spiritual failure. Instead of helping the mind reorganize, it increases inner tension. And constant tension does not renew the mind. It only exhausts it. Many people spend more time defending themselves from God than resting in Him. They struggle to prove their faith is real when God never demanded that proof. Spiritual self-pressure creates a heavy inner atmosphere, where any misplaced thought becomes grounds for accusation. God does not accuse a mind that is still in process. He does not look at your thoughts with disappointment. He sees history, context, deep layers being touched with care. Grace does not wait for the mind to organize itself before acting. It enters precisely where there is still confusion, repetition, and weariness. When guilt begins to lose its power, something changes even if thoughts continue to appear. The weight lessens. The mind no longer has to defend itself constantly. The battle does not disappear, but it begins to take place in a safer, less hostile environment. Jesus does not draw near to measure mental performance. He draws near to sustain the weary. He does not demand immediate inner silence. He offers constant presence in the middle of the noise. And that presence changes the atmosphere of the war. If this part of the message is speaking to you right now, stay with us until the end of this video and subscribe to the channel. Perhaps the rest you are looking for is not found in thinking differently, but in stopping the habit of accusing yourself while you are still learning to trust. And when guilt begins to step aside, a new possibility opens. Not the immediate end of the struggle, but the chance to face it without carrying alone a weight that was never meant to be yours. There comes a moment when exhaustion is no longer just mental and begins to reach something deeper. It's not only what you think that weighs on you, but the constant effort to hold everything together inside, trying to fix the mind, control emotions, adjust thoughts, prove that your faith is real. Over time, this quiet effort turns into exhaustion. Many Christians learn, often without realizing it, that spiritual maturity means mastering the mind. That strong faith is the same as inner control. But this path almost always produces more tension than rest. The more you try to defeat your own thoughts, the more energy they seem to demand. The struggle intensifies when it is fought alone. Paul describes a breaking point when he reports hearing God say, "My grace is sufficient for you, for my power is made perfect in weakness." 2 Corinthians 12:9. This word is not spoken to someone who found mental balance. It is spoken to someone who recognized the limits of their own strength. Grace does not arrive after strength succeeds. It arrives when strength no longer sustains. God does not begin transformation by asking your thoughts to change. He begins by offering a new place of support. Before reorganizing the mind, he repositions dependence. The question shifts from, "How do I think differently?" to, "Who am I leaning on while I still think this way?" When dependence changes, something inside begins to shift. Thoughts may still appear, but they no longer carry the same weight. The mind no longer has to carry alone what it was never meant to sustain. The effort lessens, the tension loosens, the heart begins to breathe from a different place. Faith matures when control is released, not when it is refined. God does not ask you to perfect your ability to stay strong inside. He invites you to acknowledge your limits and remain anyway. This surrender does not weaken faith, it makes it more honest. Jesus never called people to conquer the mind. He called people to remain in him, to remain when thoughts do not cooperate, to remain when the inner world still wavers, to remain when clarity has not yet arrived. His presence becomes the center, not inner performance. This kind of dependence changes how the mind experiences the process. Difficult thoughts still appear, confusing days still happen, oscillations still exist. But now there is constant support. The mind learns without being alone. The process continues without despair. And when the weight changes hands, something begins to transform quietly, not because the thoughts disappear, but because you no longer need to defeat them in order to keep walking with God. There is a quiet expectation among many Christians that the renewal of the mind should happen quickly, as if God had an ideal timeline, almost a deadline, for reorganizing thoughts, emotions, and inner reactions. When that does not happen as expected, a sense of spiritual delay appears, as if something were being left behind. But the renewal God brings does not respond to human urgency. It responds to permanence. Paul writes, "Do not be conformed to this world, but be transformed by the renewing of your mind, that you may prove what is the good and acceptable and perfect will of God." Romans 12:2. He is not describing an isolated moment or a sudden experience. He is describing a continuous movement, something that unfolds as life goes on, while the mind is still being formed. The renewal of the mind rarely comes with clear signs. There is no specific day when you wake up different. There are weeks when nothing seems to change, days when the same thoughts return, moments when everything feels repetitive. And yet, something is being worked on quietly, steadily, and deeply. In this process, time is not a spiritual enemy. It becomes an ally. God does not work only in intense or easily explained moments. He works in repetition, in the ordinary, in days that feel too unremarkable to produce transformation. It is in this slow rhythm that the mind begins to reorganize without violence. Urgency almost always creates anxiety, and anxiety pushes the mind toward control. When you demand quick results, the mind shifts into defense mode. It tries to produce change in order to feel safe, but God does not form the mind under pressure. He forms it in environments of trust and continuity. Jesus never rushed inner processes. He remained with people in formation for long periods. He walked with disciples who were slow to understand, who repeated mistakes, who fluctuated emotionally. His presence was not withdrawn because of their slowness. On the contrary, it was that very permanence that transformed them. To remain does not mean to stagnate. It means to stay present even when there are no clear signs of progress. It means trusting that God is working while you still feel like you are in the same place. Faith deepens when you accept that not every change will be immediately noticeable, and little by little something becomes perceptible. Not the complete absence of difficult thoughts, but a new relationship with them. They still arise, but they no longer dominate everything. Something was being renewed while you simply remained. Many people have learned to measure their spiritual maturity by the quality of their own thoughts. When the mind feels calm, they feel strong. When difficult thoughts appear, they assume something is wrong, that they have regressed or lost spiritual depth. But this way of measuring faith almost always produces insecurity, because maturity is not the absence of inner conflict. There is a profound difference between having difficult thoughts and being ruled by them. Thoughts arise for many reasons: personal history, emotional memories, fear, exhaustion, old experiences that still echo. They do not appear to evaluate your faith. They appear because you are human, and God has never confused humanity with spiritual immaturity. Scripture acknowledges this fragility when it says, "The Lord knows the thoughts of man, that they are futile." Psalm 94:11. This verse carries no tone of accusation. It carries recognition. God knows the human mind in its repetition, its instability, its vulnerability, and that knowledge does not drive him away. Spiritual maturity is not permanent inner silence. It is the ability to remain in God even when the inner world is still noisy. It is continuing to trust when thoughts do not cooperate. It is refusing to abandon the journey simply because the mind has not fully reorganized yet. Many spiritually deep people have walked through long seasons of inner instability, not because they were weak, but because they were being formed. Mental vulnerability does not cancel spiritual depth. Often it is the very ground where that depth is shaped with greater care. When you measure your maturity only by what you think, you become captive to your own mind. Every oscillation feels like a threat. Every misplaced thought becomes a reason for doubt. But when you learn that maturity is permanence, your relationship with the mind begins to change. It no longer defines everything. Jesus does not draw near only when the mind is clear. He remains when thoughts still hurt, when memories still tighten, when confusion still exists. His presence does not depend on the quality of your inner dialogue, but on your willingness to keep walking with him, even without clear answers. There is something deeply liberating about realizing that God knows your thoughts without being scandalized by them. He is not surprised by what still appears. He does not withdraw from what still hurts. He walks with you, forming patiently. When this understanding settles in, thoughts stop acting as judges of your spiritual level. They become simple signs of areas still being cared for, areas known by God, areas where he remains. And it is in this space that a more secure maturity begins to emerge. Not based on controlling the mind, but on the constancy of a faith that continues, even while the mind is still learning how to rest. There is a very common confusion between mental instability and spiritual instability. When thoughts begin to oscillate, many people conclude that something within them is also drifting away from God. But the mind and the spirit do not always move at the same pace. The mind may oscillate, while the spirit remains firm, sustained by something deeper. Paul describes this tension clearly when he writes, "For the flesh lusts against the spirit, and the spirit against the flesh. And these are contrary to one another, so that you do not do the things that you wish." Galatians 5:17. He does not treat this struggle as an unexpected mistake in the life of faith. He presents it as part of the ongoing reality of spiritual life. The struggle exists, and still the spirit remains. Mental oscillation does not interrupt the work of God. Thoughts vary, emotions rise and fall, perception shifts with exhaustion, fear, or different seasons of life. None of this indicates divine abandonment. It simply shows that the mind remains human, while the spirit remains faithful and present. Many people use the state of the mind as a thermometer for God's presence. When thoughts feel confused, they assume they have lost spiritual stability. When the mind feels tired, they believe faith has weakened. But true stability is not found in the consistency of thought. It is found in the permanence of relationship with God. Jesus never promised a mind without conflict. He promised constant presence. He never said the inner world would always be organized, but he assured that no one would be left alone in the middle of disorder. The spirit does not withdraw because the mind oscillates. He remains right there, sustaining even when you do not notice. There are days when everything feels misaligned inside, yet faith still exists, even without clear explanations. There are moments when the mind is exhausted, but the heart still trusts, still yields, still remains. This quiet trust, even without clarity, is a profound form of spiritual stability. When you understand this, something adjusts internally. The mind can oscillate without being experienced as a threat. A difficult thought appears, but it no longer has the power to define your faith, your identity, or God's presence in your life. The struggle continues, but it is no longer the center. Jesus remains with you in this space. He does not require the mind to stabilize in order to stay close. He sustains you while the process unfolds, and that sustaining presence changes the experience of the struggle, even if the struggle still exists. If this part of the message is reaching you right now, stay with us until the end of the video and subscribe to the channel. Perhaps what you need most in this moment is not to organize your mind, but to realize that the Spirit already remains with you, even while everything is still oscillating inside. And from that recognition, something begins to form quietly. Not complete mental silence, but a deeper protection, strong enough to guard you in the middle of what has not yet changed. Many people have learned to seek peace as if it were complete mental silence, as if being at peace meant not thinking, not remembering, not feeling any inner tension at all. When that does not happen, the conclusion usually comes quickly: then I must not be at peace. But the peace God offers does not begin by erasing thoughts. It begins by protecting you in the middle of them. Paul describes this peace very specifically when he writes, "And the peace of God, which surpasses all understanding, will guard your hearts and your minds in Christ Jesus." Philippians 4:7. He does not speak of an empty mind. He speaks of a guarded mind. Peace does not eliminate inner movement. It places a boundary so that movement does not take over everything. Thoughts continue to arise, ideas return, memories surface without warning. The difference is that God's peace establishes an invisible boundary. What once flooded the entire inner space now meets containment. The mind slowly learns that not every thought needs to be followed, analyzed, or fought. This protection profoundly changes the inner experience, even before any complete transformation takes place. The mind still thinks, but it no longer drowns in what it thinks. There is room to breathe. There is a gentle distance that prevents everything from becoming urgent. And this distance is not spiritual coldness. It is care. Many times God guards before he transforms. He protects before he reorganizes. He sustains before he resolves. Because a protected mind can move through the process without breaking. Peace becomes a temporary shelter while formation continues quietly. Jesus offers exactly this kind of peace. Not a fragile peace, dependent on everything being resolved, but a peace that remains even while the inner world is still in motion. He does not require you to stop thinking in order to rest. He teaches you how to rest while you are still thinking. When this peace begins to work, your relationship with the mind changes. Tension eases. The struggle loses intensity. The heart understands that it is guarded even without total control. Peace does not explain everything. It does not answer every question, but it sustains you while the answers have not yet come. There is something deeply restorative about knowing that you can think without losing yourself in what you think, that you can feel without being dominated by what you feel. This protection is not the absence of battle, it is presence in the middle of it. And it is within this protected environment that the process continues without despair. The mind is still learning, thoughts still arise. But now there is enough care to move through what has not yet changed, without losing the ground on which you are being sustained. There is a quiet, often unspoken expectation that God only sustains after the mind is organized, as if divine care were the result of emotional balance, inner clarity, or psychological stability. But the logic of the kingdom does not work that way. God does not wait for the mind to learn before he sustains. He sustains while the mind is still learning. The psalmist expresses this with simplicity and depth when he writes, "Cast your burden on the Lord, and he will sustain you. He will never allow the righteous to be shaken." Psalm 55:22. This verse does not condition sustenance on the absence of weight. It begins by acknowledging that there is a burden and affirms that it is precisely there that God sustains. God does not demand immediate mental silence. He does not require total clarity, constant emotional stability, or psychological control in order to remain present. He knows the rhythm of the human mind. He knows it learns in layers, through processes, over different lengths of time. And while that learning unfolds, he sustains you so that you do not collapse inwardly. Many people believe they will only be able to rest once they finally think the right way, as if rest were the result of inner victory. But true rest begins when you understand that you do not need to be ready in order to be sustained. God's care is not a reward for those who won the inner war. It is ongoing support for those who are still in it. Jesus never called people who were already organized inside. He called people who were tired, confused, and burdened. People who were still learning how to carry what they thought, felt, and held within. And he did not withdraw the call because of their slowness. He walked with them exactly as they were, at the real pace of their lives. There is something deeply healing in realizing that you can continue to be cared for even while the mind still oscillates. That the process does not invalidate God's presence. That inner learning does not delay divine love. He sustains today, not later. He sustains in the middle, not only at the end. When you begin to trust this kind of sustaining care, something changes quietly. The mind is still learning, still oscillating, still reorganizing, but you no longer have to carry everything alone. The weight does not disappear, but it is no longer all on you. And it is from this place that the heart begins to rest more deeply. Not because everything has been resolved, not because the mind has finally gone silent, but because you realize that you did not fall, you are not falling. And you will not be abandoned, even while you are still learning how to think with a renewed mind. Perhaps, as you arrive here, something inside you feels a little quieter. Not because the thoughts have disappeared, not because the mind has finally been organized, but because the weight is no longer resting entirely on you. Along this journey, it has become clear that faith was never about conquering the mind, but about learning how not to lose yourself inside it. You did not fail because you still think this way. You did not fall back because the struggle continues. Your faith did not become weak because the thoughts return. What changed was the place where all of this is now being held. What you once carried alone has begun to rest in hands greater than your own. Perhaps today you can see something that once felt impossible. Your thoughts do not define your faith, your maturity, or your closeness to God. They exist, but they no longer occupy the center. They pass, but they do not rule. They speak, but they do not have the final word over who you are or where God is. Jesus never asked you to silence your mind in order to walk with him. He never demanded constant emotional clarity, psychological control, or perfect stability. He simply asked you to come, tired, confused, in process, and to remain. His presence has always been greater than any inner disorder. Imagine for a moment the hand of Christ resting on you right now, not to correct what you think, not to force your mind into alignment, but to sustain you, to communicate without words that you are being held, that even while the mind is still learning, you are not falling, that even while the inner battle continues, you are not alone in it. Perhaps the rest you have been searching for all this time was never found in thinking differently. Perhaps it was always found in trusting differently, in allowing God to carry what you have tried to resolve alone for years, in accepting that true transformation does not begin with control, but with dependence. So let this question remain gently with you, without any rush to answer it. What if God was never waiting for your mind to change in order to care for you, but was simply waiting for you to stop carrying everything alone? What if renewal is happening right now, not at the pace of your self-pressure, but at the patient pace of grace? If this message has found you where you are today, stay with us, subscribe to the channel, and continue watching. Here, you do not need to be ready to be cared for. Here you are allowed to remain in process. Here you are allowed to learn while being sustained by Jesus.